out of Counttown that time. Good morning and welcome back. By golly, Mark, isn't it neat, live television? I mean, and then I got my own critic over there that sits over there we call Carton, but he keeps me on my toes. When we went to commercial break, a lot of to-do is being made about, a name. All right, each pope chooses his name, and that is supposedly done through dutiful prayer and forethought about this the whole time, and it's supposed to identify the individual from a historic, background. Mm-hmm. And this pope chose Francis, and like when we said Francis the first, well, you have to have a second before you have a first, but we got Francis and Pope Francis, and there's a lot of speculation out there what that means. Can you tell us what you think?
Well, the thing that people probably presume is that it's St. Francis of Assisi, the founder of the Franciscan order, because of his love of the poor and kind of personal poverty, not right. living there. And that may be so. I haven't seen anything official about that. I suspect that it's probably, at least partly, though, recognizing St. Francis Xavier, who was one of the first Jesuits. And Francis Xavier was actually an evangelizer of Asia. He traveled to East Asia, went to Japan, and made many converts. He was ultimately died in Asia, and one of the challenges for the Catholic Church is China, where the Chinese Communist government has tried to set up what they call the Catholic Patriotic Association, or their official approved church, as opposed to the underground house church that recognizes the Pope. And the communist authorities, of course, are extremely paranoid about recognizing any authority, even if it's only a spiritual authority, to anyone outside there. I mean, it's right. A typical totalitarian worry is that if you recognize somebody else outside there. So I think that there's at least a chance that the new Pope chose Francis Xavier as his patron, and may be actually looking to Asia as the new place for evangelization.
I haven't heard that on Fox or CNN, so that's... I haven't heard that aspect of it.
Well, they haven't asked me to come and be a guest.
You heard it here first, but I never would have thought about that. And
well, it's because he's a Jesuit. I mean, I wouldn't have thought of that either, except for the Jesuit connection. But Francis Xavier was one of the first group that Ignatius Loyola took in to form the Society of Jesus, that order. So I think that he's at least got to have that in the back of his mind when
right.
when he chose that.
Now, explain a little bit, if you would, before we go to the next thing. We're going to talk about some of the controversy within the church a little bit. But what is the Pope's job?
Well, the Pope is the Bishop of Rome,
okay.
And so he's got a diocese to run, but he has assistants for that. But as I mentioned, that as the other apostles recognized Peter as their head, the bishops throughout the world recognized the Bishop of Rome as their head, and the word Pope comes from Papa, which, no surprise, means father.
Right.
And he's the father to the church. I mean, he's got various titles, the Vicar of Christ. We believe that that when Christ promised that the gates of hell would not prevail against the church that was founded on Peter, that means that the Pope, in terms of morals and doctrine, when he speaks officially on a topic, he's speaking with the authority of the Holy Spirit. Um, that happens extremely rarely. It's not like the Pope decides, oh, I'm going to go declare this or that. I mean, there's a 2,000-year tradition is not something that someone, even with absolute powers, can just throw out. And I mean, that people that think in political secular terms may think, oh yeah, we just get the right person in there and we can change this and change that. Well, if what you're teaching is the truth, you can't go and just say, oh, well, this was true yesterday, but today we're going to change it.
Yeah. Well, Mark, a lot of things come up, questions about the priesthood, because that's more of a local level, and then the archbishop, and then as you went through the hierarchy before. But what we hear about mostly is the local church. We hear about the priests. Whatever happened to? I got to ask you, whatever happened to nuns? I don't see them running around. I remember as a child, there's a nun.
Well, there are still nuns around, and there are actually the orders that kept the traditional habits and all are actually having trouble fitting in with all the postulants that they have. But after Vatican II, unfortunately, a number of the orders of nuns, and actually technically a nun is just a female monk. They're orders of sisters, like teaching sisters that everyone refers to as nuns, but technically they're not nuns. But many of them got, I'll say, infected with some of the modernist tendencies, and many of these groups, you can still spot them by the way they cut their hair and the polyester pantsuits that they wear. But and that's maybe a little bit uncharitable of me to say that, but unfortunately it's
if we
true.
see them out there protesting outside, we know you didn't touch them.
I remember seeing a couple of them interviewed in 2005 after Benedict XVI was elected, and one of them said, "Oh, well, we were really hoping for the African." And I'm just thinking, you guys are so stereotypical. You think that because somebody's a particular color that he's going to vote a particular way, because there were many more than just one African cardinal, and I think they were probably thinking of Cardinal Arinze because he was the most well known, but he would have been a sad disappointment to them because he was extremely conservative in his doctrine and so on. So anyway, but the embracing liberal theology has not been good for the orders of sisters, and many of them are, they're not getting new members. They're getting old and dying away. But the more traditional orders are actually quite vigorous and are
now,
still
in Europe. You see the Hobbit and things like that more than you do in the States.
Well, at least in places like Rome, obviously, there are quite a number, and the missionaries of charity that Mother Teresa founded. You will see those in larger American cities also.
Well, you mentioned something, and it was called Vatican II. What is Vatican II?
Vatican II was a council of the Church. It was called by Pope John the 23rd in the early 60s, and it was brought in to kind of talk about the church and how to bring it up to date. The Italian word was aggiornamento, to bring it up to the modern day. Now, I think, and in my defense, I'm not the only one. The Pope Benedict XVI also thought this, that Vatican II was what we would call pastoral in its outlook, that everything that it said needed to be looked at in terms of the ongoing tradition, and that it was not a radical break. But there were certain groups that you know, it was during the 60s when there were student, you know, movements and so on, and various things, the sexual revolution and so on going on, and people were saying, oh, well, this is going on in the church too. If you read the documents themselves, I think you'll find that's not true, that the focus of Vatican II was actually to involve lay people more in going out and evangelizing the world. Instead, what some people have interpreted it as is, well, letting some of these modern tendencies into the church and making us, you know, relevant. But this was really brought home to me when I was raised as a Protestant and actually was in a Lutheran seminary. Well, I went to the University of Aarhus in Denmark and was a guest student of the theological faculty and was taking a church history course, and the professor there was, you know, we were reading the documents of Vatican II, and he was saying, well, these Catholics, they haven't changed a thing. Look at this, look at this. I was thinking, well, I know my Catholic friends think that Vatican II is a big deal and that it was a change. He must be wrong. But over the years, as I studied and found that, you know, he was absolutely right. Now, he was approaching it from a Lutheran doctrinal position where he was certain that they were wrong, and as I studied more, I came to find no, the Catholics were right all along. But if you read the documents of Vatican II, they did not change church doctrine. It's more kind of the outlook on things, and saying that the laity needs to know more theology and go out and act in the world.
That's what I'd heard, is Vatican II had changed the entire Catholic, you know, mainframe, and where we're going now is like, okay, maybe not so, but what has happened, Mark, in the priesthoods, that, you know, marriage, homosexuality, the attacks or accusations of sexual impropriety and things like this all came to a head during this Pope conclave or pre-conclave, and you know, people are out there wanting women in the priesthood. And there's, you know, I heard some interview yesterday, you may have heard it too, where there's a group of people there, a couple, two, they were standing there being interviewed. How these people find these folks in a crowd like that, I'll never know. But anyway, they were all for women being in the priesthood. I don't know if you saw that or not.
I didn't see that, but I'm not surprised. You know, if people haven't noticed, men and women are different and have different functions. They're complementary. I mean, in the book of Genesis, it
that's
says
a Catholic view, folks.
God created man in his own image, male and female. Right. He created them. I mean, the people sometimes get bent out of shape about the use of man for the whole species, but that's just the way the English language works. And you know, I can't be a mother because I'm male, and there's a reason that we call priest father, because he is the father of
that church.
Yes, and he's a father to everyone. Just as a practical sort of thing, I mentioned that in the Latin Rite, the Roman Catholic Church, the priests have traditionally been celibate. They're not married. Now, you know, I'll just throw this out. There are married Catholic priests, and I've mentioned that some of the Greek rites have liturgies that are similar to the Greek Orthodox, and the priests in those rites are allowed to marry, and they have wives, so there are married Catholic priests. There also are certain Anglican Episcopalian priests who have converted to Catholicism, and a special dispensation has been made for them, if they're already married, to become Catholic priests even though they're married. So it's not a an absolute sort of thing. However, it also is, I think that if you talk to any pastor's wife, it's difficult in a Protestant connection. I think it's a difficult role for that person to be a leader in his congregation and then still be an adequate husband. So as a disciplinary matter, the Latin Church says yes, the priest should be celibate. They're not married. Now, homosexuality in the eyes of the Catholic Church is not just wrong, it's a sin. That's not to say that we don't love the person, but the practice of homosexuality is a sin. In fact, traditionally, it's one of the sins, along with murder and depriving a worker of his wages, that we say cry to heaven for vengeance. It's something that's very, very bad. Cardinal Bergoglio talked about, I mentioned earlier, his opposition to gay marriage. He has said that allowing homosexual couples to adopt children is discrimination against those children. So
it makes a lot of sense too when you
that he says every child has the right to have a father and a mother, not two fathers or two mothers. So
it's a good point.
And that's, I mean, and that, obviously there are going to be situations we hear about single mothers all the time, and that's not to detract from them and the huge job that they have to do, but I think that it's very difficult for anyone to maintain with a straight face that the ideal situation is if not to have a father who's male and a mother who's female operating together to raise the child. And going back to Genesis, that you need those complementary parts, and that's not to say that the Catholic Church, by denying ordination as a priest to women, is discriminating against women in any way. It's, obviously there are women that have lots of influence, and they're just completely different roles, and I think most of the people that advocate for women priests, if you get down to it, what they're looking for is power, political power, and in the secular sense. They want to be able to go, and they're not doing it for the reasons of service, which one of the titles of the Pope is the servant of the servants of God.
Well, Mark, I know there's a lot more I'd like to talk to you about, but time is of the essence, so we can get back into the schedule of things. But overall, what do you anticipate this new Pope, as we close here today? What do you think he's going to bring to the table?
Well, obviously, I think that he brings a certain humbleness that I think people are going to find engaging. Although, again, John Paul II was such an extrovert. You could maybe relate to him, and people talk about, we need this in the age of media. We need somebody who can go on television and be engaging with the people. And then we got Benedict XVI, who is an introvert and intellectual. And you probably didn't know this, but the attendance at the Wednesday audiences for Benedict XVI has surpassed anything that happened with John Paul II. That Benedict XVI was more popular than John Paul II, even though the media would never there. But the Benedict's genuineness, his taking complicated matters and making them clear, and his obvious love for the people made him extremely popular. People know if somebody loves them, and they respond accordingly. And I suspect a similar thing with Francis. He's obviously very, very humble. He lives simply, but he also knows how to govern. He has, been firm when he needs to be, and I think that he will take his own path by choosing a name that has never been chosen. Again, he's clearly showing his independence, but I think that he will I mean, I don't know what direction he's going to go, but I would be very surprised if any of the progressive voices are happy with him after a year or two.
Well, Mark, we appreciate, like I said, once again, for you to come on and share this with us, and it's been a very enlightening, for me it has, I'm sure for our viewers as well, but we'd love to have you come back on and talk about other matters that we've talked to you about, and certainly very, I know I'm going to build you up a little bit, you're a very educated, well formed person when it comes to putting things together and coming out with, you know, a thought process on it. And the reason I say that is, are you the only lawyer in Alabama that has ever gone up against the Supreme Court?
No, there are other lawyers from Alabama.
But are
I think
you
the only one in this county, and I don't know of any surrounding counties.
But to succeed and win the case, where do you stand on that? I know it's up there.
They're not a lot. I mean,
there's not a lot of lawyers that can say, "Hey, the Supreme Court sided with me."
Right.
So you're a very factual person in information gathering, and we appreciate that, and we highly respect you. And
Thank you.
And you have a beautiful wife, very intelligent. My goodness, that woman. Where'd you get two people, you know, so alike as far as knowledge and stuff? And
Well, we actually met at the University of Notre Dame.
there you go, another Catholic thing.
Well, I have to tell you, I cheered for the University of Alabama.
That was my next question.
I mean, Ann got her law degree from Alabama. Our son went to Alabama. I've got my LLM in taxation from there. But I told folks that I knew that Nick Saban was a practicing Catholic. I wasn't sure about the folks from Notre Dame.
Well said. Folks, Mark Christensen, we surely appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Eddie.
All right, folks, keep it
real.
Keep God in it. We love y'all. God bless you, and thank you for watching.